Wait a minute, can you turn the camera? Yeah, now push back on there so the top part elevates. Yeah, that's good right there. That's good right there. Thanks. Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Giri Baradari Yasoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yamunatira Banachari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Prabhupada, Prabhupada Jaya, Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramhamsa Paramajakacharyato Tadasata Shri Srimad Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Grantaraj Srimad Bhāgavatam Ki Samveda Bhakta Vrinda Ki Gaur Premanandi. All glories to some devotees. All glories to some devotees. All glories to some devotees. All glories to Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Ajnanatimirandasya Ghananjana Shalakhaya Chakshur Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Shtapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandehang Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavam Cha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Ragunatanbitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhunam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakanvitam Cha Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavan Eshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare Hare. So today we are on Canto 3, Chapter 21, Text 22. Rishi Uvacha Rishi Uvacha Iti Avyalikam Pranuto Bjanabas Iti Avyalikam Pranuto Bjanabas Tam Abbashe Vachasamritena Tam Abbashe Vachasamritena Suparna Paksho Parirochamana Suparna Paksho Parirochamana Prema Smito Dvikshana Vibramad Rishi Uvacha Ityavilikam Pranuto Bjanabas Tam Abbashe Vachasamritena Suparna Paksho Parirochamana Prema smito dvikshana vibramad Rishir uvacha Ityavyalikam pranuto bjanabas Tam ababashe vachasamrtena Suparna paksho parirochamana Prema smito dvikshanavi brahmadbru Rishi uvacha Ityavyalikam pranuto bjanabas Tam ababashe vachasamrtena Suparna paksho parirochamana Prema smito dvikshanavi brahmadabru Rishi uvacha Ityavyalikam pranuto bjanabas Tam abhashe vachasamrtena Suparna paksho parirochamana Prema smito dvikshana vibhamadbhu Rishi uvacha Ityavyalikam pranuto bjanabas Tang abhashe vachasamrtena Suparna paksho parirochamana Prema smito dvikshana vibhamadbhu Rishi uvacha Ityavyalikam pranuto bjanabas Tam abhashe vachasamrtena Suparna paksho parirochamana Prema smito dvikshana vibhamadbhu Vaishnavis Rishi uvacha Ityavyalikam pranuto bjanabas Tam abhashe vachasamrtena Suparna paksho parirochamana Prema smito dvikshana vibhamadbhu Okay, so the word for word. Rishir uvacha, the great sage Maitreya said. Iti, thus. Avyalikam, sincerely. Pranutaha, having been praised. Abjanabaha, Lord Vishnu. Tam, to Kardama Muni. Abhabhashe replied, Vachasa, with words, Amritena, as sweet as nectar, Suparna, of Garuda, Paksha, the shoulders, Upari, upon, Rochamanaha, shining, Prema, of affection, Smita, with a smile, Udvikshana, looking, vibramat, gracefully moving, bruhu, eyebrows. So the verse translates, Maitreya resumed, sincerely extolled in these words, Lord Vishnu, shining very beautifully on the shoulders of Garuda, replied, with words as sweet as nectar. His eyebrows moved gracefully as he looked at the sage with a smile full of affection. So we can do this responsively. Maitreya resumed, sincerely extolled in these words, Lord Vishnu, shining very beautifully on the shoulders of Garuda, replied with words as sweet as nectar. His eyebrows moved gracefully as he looked at the sage with a smile full of affection. Right, so here is Prabhupada's purport. The word vachasamartena is significant. Whenever the Lord speaks, he speaks from the transcendental world. He does not speak from the material world. Since he is transcendental, his speech is also transcendental. As is his activity, everything in relation to him is transcendental. The word amrita refers to one who does not meet with death. The words and activities of the Lord are deathless. Therefore, they are not manufactured of this material world. The sound of this material world and that of the spiritual world are completely different. The sound of the spiritual world is nectarian and eternal, whereas the sound of the material world is hackneyed and subject to end. The sound of the holy name, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, everlastingly increases the enthusiasm of the chanter. If one repeats monotonous material worlds, he will feel exhausted. But if he chants Hare Krishna 24 hours a day, he will never feel exhausted. Rather, he will feel encouraged to continue chanting more and more. When the Lord replied to sage Kardam, the word vachasamartena is specifically mentioned. Since he spoke from the transcendental world, he replied in transcendental words, and when he spoke, his eyebrows moved with great affection. When a devotee praises the glories of the Lord is very satisfied. And he bestows transcendental benediction upon the devotee without reservation, because he is always causelessly merciful toward his devotee. Rishi uvacha iti avyalikam pranuto bhyanabas tam ababashe vachasamrtena suparna paksho pari rochamanaha premasmito dvikshana vibramad bruhu. Maitreya resumed, sincerely extolling in these words, Lord Vishnu, sincerely extolled in these words, Lord Vishnu, shining very beautifully on the shoulder of Garuda, replied with words as sweet as nectar. His eyebrows moved gracefully as he looked at the sage with a smile full of affection. To recap what's been going on in this section, the first 6 verses of this chapter were about Vidura inquiring about Swayambhuva Manu. Then from 7 to 12, we had Kardama offering prayers to invoke the presence of the Supreme Lord. And those prayers were so wonderful that from 13 to 21, rather from from 7 to 12, Kardama made austerities. He didn't offer prayers yet, he made austerities. From 7 to 21, he performed austerities. And then from 13 through 21, which we just finished yesterday, that section is where Kardama Muni was offering prayers to the Lord. So when Kardama Muni made various austerities, as we were discussing the other day, the Supreme Lord was so pleased with Kardama Muni that he shed tears, enough tears to create an entire lake. And that lake was called Bindu Sarovara. So now we're in this section 22 to 33, where the Supreme Lord responds to the prayers of Kardama Muni and the austerities of Kardama Muni. And then we're going to find out about the Supreme Lord fulfilling his words from 34 to 48, and then the final 49 through 57. Kardama greets King Swayambhuva Manu, who's there to deliver his daughter, Devahuti, to be the wife of Kardama Muni. So that's kind of this chapter. This chapter, at least this verse that we're in today in the purport, we hear a contrast between the spiritual and the material world. That the spiritual world is a transcendental place full of nectar. And Prabhupada uses the word vachasamrtena, which is part of this verse today. Words like nectar. I often hear these or read these sections in Bhāgavatam, and when I read them, I can imagine that there must be some kind of powerful emotion or feeling behind them, but I'm completely removed from that. I can just sort of imagine what it maybe is like or something like that. Because going on in spiritual life, we read and hear about these descriptions of the emotions, these descriptions of the feelings, these descriptions of the interactions with the Lord. We hear about the spiritual world. And at least I long one day to get some sense of what this is actually like from an emotional point of view, what it's actually to connect with this. There are times, of course, where bits of this peek through, even in someone as dry of spiritual realization as myself. Sometimes they peek through, get a little sense. And I know these things are actually real, because occasionally you do get a snatch of this other world that we keep talking about, this other reality that we keep discussing, that the great sages describe, and the Bhāgavatam describes, Bhagavad Gita describes. And one day we will feel it more and more. It won't be so radical. It won't be so distant. The reason it's distant, of course, is that for many years, many lifetimes really, not just years, but many lifetimes, we have put aside the Supreme Lord and followed our own material ambitions And because of that, the Supreme Lord had no place in our lives. And we are habituated to put the Supreme Lord in a distant position. And gradually, through the process of devotional service, this heinous tendency that we develop for so many lifetimes is being washed away, and we are drawing near to the Lord by degrees, depending on how purified you are, how seriously you apply it. Prabhupada mentions here that one can chant the holy name 24 hours and not feel tired, but if one chants some mundane sound vibration, one will immediately feel hackneyed. One will not be able to keep it up. Of course, then we can ask ourselves the question, could we chant 24 hours? Have we got that kind of taste for the holy name yet? It's certainly there. Little by little, the holy name becomes more of a reality instead of just one of those things that we do because we know we should do and we have some vague sense of how to do it. But if we make an effort to really focus in on the holy name, our entire life will change. And it's not an easy activity to come to grips with. It's so elusive in many ways. There's nothing in our previous life that prepared us for the holy name. Even if we were born in India, we really never came in contact with something as a process that is so kind of mysterious and yet simple and yet promises so much and at the same time seems to be so elusive. We try to chant, but sometimes I find myself chanting, and just after a little while I find I'm just so tired that I just have to take rest or something like that. I know I got off on the wrong foot some kind of way, that as a result of starting in a wrong mood, the mind is doing everything but focusing on the holy name. And after some time, the holy name just seems like becomes more burdensome. But there are other times where I manage to sort of grasp the right attitude, and I can somehow, I don't know what to call it, get in the groove, get in the zone where somehow or other I'm hearing the holy name and there's not a lot of distraction and I'm focusing in. And then it is kind of a mysterious experience that there's a kind of a trance there, there's a kind of a focus there, and that after an hour or so of chanting in that kind of mentality, the feeling that you experience is very different from just struggling through or just doing your rounds to do them, just mumbling through some kind of way or another. But we should know that whenever we start to chant, we will be attacked either by the mode of passion or by the mode of ignorance. It will certainly happen. If we're attacked by the mode of ignorance, we'll try to go to sleep while we're chanting. We won't be able to stay awake. If we're attacked by the mode of passion, instead, we will think about something else or do something else or be preoccupied with something else while we're chanting. So in this way, the modes of nature are harassing us mightily while we are trying to chant the holy name. And if we can somehow come to the stage where we are actually chanting with some modicum of focus, then this is really an achievement. I have to say that I feel like I wasted 30 years of my life, not really, focusing in on the holy name. Only recently maybe within the last 3 months or something like that, there's been a big sea change, a big transformation of the way that I've been able to connect with chanting. I don't know exactly what prompted it, you know. I tried a number of things, and finally something worked, you know. To me, it seems like the process of becoming better at chanting the holy name is probably a little different for everybody, you know. I know that I've been to a lot of these seminars that people give, like, you know, Satchidananda Swami, his various seminars on chanting. And I've been to those sessions, gone through a day or two of various techniques and that. And for the most part, I'm thick as a brick. It didn't do much for me. But sometimes somebody says something, and for some bizarre reason it clicks. For some reason it means something. One time, I think it was Ravinda Sarup mentioned something about how Prabhupada once said that you should chant your rounds like you're paying attention to hearing yourself chanting. It's a very simple thing, but for some reason, that seems to mean something to me. And then recently, Matuna said something about this idea of the holy name as a person. Of course, we know that's true philosophically, but thinking about the process of me chanting as somehow a person, I don't fully grasp it, but just thinking about that or having that sort of a mood while chanting seems to make a big difference for me. I don't know exactly why, but that's one of those keys that made a big difference for me. You know, I think for all of us, we've got to find what key is that thing which allows us to integrate deeply into the holy name and experience something more than just, you know, a do it to get it over with kind of mood. At least these are a couple of things that have occurred to me and happened to me recently. I thought of that when we were discussing here in this verse, because Prabhupada mentions the fact that one can chant 24 hours a day and never feel tired. You know, I'm not there, but I'm certainly a lot closer than I was 6 months ago, you know, so something has changed. And I keep coming back to the fact that in Krishna consciousness, we can do all kinds of austerities, we can learn all kinds of things, but the thing that gives us the most bang for the buck, as they put it, you know, is somehow making an effort to figure out what it is in our life that will increase the quality of our chanting, how we will do it, what key it is, what process it is, what environment, what you know, technique we have to undergo to notch up the quality of our chanting. And if we can do that, we've done more than we could have done with a lot of other possible things. You know, this is the one thing that has really made a big difference in our spiritual life. It's not an easy thing. And of course, vacha samritena, you know, here these nectarian words. So the holy name is, of course, nectarian words. This Lord is speaking nectarian words. Who's he speaking to? He's speaking them to Kardamuni. And this is being described to Vidura by Maitreya. Why is the Supreme Lord there? Because, as we said, Karda Muni performed austerities, and then he offered these nice prayers. The Supreme Lord was touched. And we can think about, the Supreme Lord has everything, he does everything. But nevertheless, he was moved by Karda Muni's austerities, so much so that he shed tears. You would think that the Supreme Lord could not be impressed by anything. However, he was impressed because of actually the devotion of Karda Muni. And then this question has come up in our classes over the last few weeks, Karda Muni is a great devotee, and here he is meeting the Supreme Lord, and he's going to ask the Supreme Lord for a wife. It seems like, what's up with that? And Prabhupada actually answers that question, but I'm not sure what to make of the answer. I saw it the other day, and I'm going to go back to it. It's in verse 16 in the purport. A question may be raised. Since Karda Muni was advanced in spiritual life, then why did he not ask the Lord for liberation? Why did he want to enjoy material life in spite of his personally seeing and experiencing the Supreme Lord? Here's Prabhupada's answer. The answer is that not everyone is competent to be liberated from material bondage. It is everyone's duty, therefore, to enjoy according to his present position, but under the direction of the Lord or the Vedas. So what we are gradually learning about, and what will be a theme in not only the verses that have come before, but also in the next few verses in this same section, that we will hear about akama and sakama devotees. So akama and sakama devotees. So akama means devotees who have no material desires, and sakama means devotees who have all kinds of material desires. And what is all that about exactly? This is nicely described in Bhagavad Gita in the 9th chapter. Let me go there. 9:13, we hear about Mahatmanas tu mamparta daivam prakritim ashrata bhajanti ananya manaso gyatva bhutadim avyayam. O son of Pritha, those who are not deluded, the great souls, are under the protection of my divine nature. They are fully engaged in devotional service because they know me as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, original and inexhaustible. So this is the top tier. This is the gold standard. And Mahatmanas, Prabhupada, or not Prabhupada, Krishna is using this word, Mahatmanas, that they are called Mahatmas. They are fully under the divine protection, and they know the Supreme Lord as the Supreme Person and inexhaustible. And then what do? Satatam kirtayanto mam yatantash chadridha vrataha namashantastamam bhaktya nitya yukta upasate. So always chanting my glories, endeavoring with great determination, bowing down before me, these great souls perpetually worship me with devotion. So they are constantly chanting. Again, we come back to this theme of the holy name, of chanting the holy name. So these are the Mahatmas, the gold standard, the top tier. What's underneath? These are Akam devotees. So what do we mean by Sakam devotees? And these are described actually in the 7th chapter of Bhagavad Gita 7:16, where we hear that there is the 4 kinds of people who approach the Supreme Lord. The artarti, the jigyasur, and the jnani. So they are called sukritina. So these are those who know enough to approach the Supreme Lord, but are not yet able to give up material desires completely. So these are Sakama devotees. And evidently Prabhupada is making the point that at least at this stage, Karda Muni is in the class of Sakam devotees. And he is coming to the Lord for particular material desire, although we can see that he's almost beyond that stage, because what will happen, of course, as you know, spoiler alert here if you don't know the story, but what will happen is that Karda Muni will be visited by Swayambhuva Manu. He'll become married to Devahuti. They will serve together as husband and wife, yogi couple, both yogis, and then Devahuti will become thin and emaciated and from long service, and she will ask Karda Muni that she would like children, so Karda Muni will create an aerial spaceship, and they will travel through the universe. And then Karda Muni will expand himself 9 times. He'll have 9 daughters. Then after that, then he will prepare to take sannyas, because all this time has come. They've enjoyed nicely, and now Karda Muni is ready to go on to the next stage of life, to give it all up. So then Devahuti asks Karda Muni to give her a son, so she'll have someone when he's gone. So that's when Kapila Dev is born, and Kapila Dev will teach Devahuti the process of Sankhya. And so Karda Muni will undergo more austerities with his wife, with Devahuti, and then they'll enjoy for some time traveling in their aerial spaceship. And then after that's finished, then what will take place is they'll have children, and then Karda Muni will leave, but at this point Devahuti will have a son, and that son Kapila will give her comfort and teach her the Sankhya philosophy. And that's what goes on, how this story unravels itself. So at that stage, Karda Muni is moving from Sakama devotee to a Akam devotee. He is no longer interested in anything in the material world. So it's interesting that there's a stage below this, you know. So we've talked about the Mahatmas, the gold standard, which is verses 9:13 and 14, and then here is 9:15. Jnana yagyena chapyanye yajanto mamupasate ekatvena pratakvena bahuda vishvato mukham. So others who engage in the sacrifice by cultivation of knowledge worship the Supreme Lord as A, one without a second, 2, diverse in many, and 3, in the universal form. So ekatvena is the one without a second. Pritak-vena bahuda is diverse in many. And Vishvatomukh, that is the universal form. And Prabhupada describes this whole thing that I've just been talking about in this purport of 9:15, that we have the Mahatmanas, which are at the highest level. They're Akam devotees. Then below them we have the Sukratinas, which are Sakama devotees. And then this classification, these are not really devotees, you know, they're a little bit lower than that. So the Ekatvena, Prabhupada describes, he calls them the lowest, and then although he calls them the lowest, he goes on to say the other two are lower. So, the Ekatvena are those who worship themselves as God. And Prabhupada said there is at least some benefit there, because they realize that they're not the body. And then below the Ekatvena are the Pritak-vena bahuda, those who worship either demigods, many different gods, or they concoct some form of God and worship that. So this is even lower. And then beneath that is the Vishvatomukha, those people who just see the universe, the pantheists, those people who see just the universe as God in a vague sort of way. So this is kind of what we are going to see as the themes for this section of Srimad Bhāgavatam. We're going to hear the theme of, Karda Muni making his way from a Sakam devotee to an Akam devotee. We're going to hear about those two different things. We're going to hear about the Supreme Lord hearing and fulfilling the desires of the devotees, even when those desires to some extent are material. The Supreme Lord will fulfill material desires for the devotee when he sees that those material desires are not deeply damaging to that devotee's spiritual life. So there are occasions where the Supreme Lord will not fulfill material desires of a devotee when he sees they'll be disastrous for the devotee. But in some cases, the Supreme Lord will, to a certain extent, fulfill material desires, and at the same time allow the devotee to become gradually, released from those material desires. And so this is kind of the way it works. And to me, this kind of reminds me of how this process works, that when I was really little, when I was, I guess, must have been about 7 or 8 years old or something like that, I really, really heard and wanted to visit Disneyland. I heard about it. This was before they had Epcot Center. This was the one and only Disneyland in Anaheim, California. So I meditated on it. I got maps of it, and I saw what the rides were, and I kind of thought about it. These are the pipe dreams you have as a child. These kind of things. You really think this is going to be, the cat's pajamas. It's going to be just so wonderful if you can go there. Of course, my parents had no intention of going to Anaheim, California, and taking me to Disneyland. However, some years later, I got a call from my parents, and they wanted me to come and meet them in Disneyland in Anaheim. However, I was 21 at the time, so at that time, I had absolutely no interest whatsoever in going there. But even at that point, I wasn't a devotee at the time, but I just thought about how, here was a desire that was just so center in my life at one time. And finally it gets fulfilled at a time when I'm totally not even interested in it. And of course, I was totally bored. And the first thing I noticed when I got to Disneyland was that you're like a giant there, because everything in Disneyland is scaled down, so it's like for kids. And so, you notice that everything is kind of dwarfish there. And I couldn't wait to get away and go back. But I thought about how, how desires change over the years, that you have these desires as a child, and then later on you get older and they no longer mean anything to you. All right, so I want to leave some time for questions and feedback. So if anybody has any questions or comments, we can.
So Maharaj, I was appreciating the point you were talking about the chanting, how to find some keys that help us, and you shared some keys with us. And I was thinking how to, you could say the materialistic mindset, or the mindset that one condition is thinking, I have to see some results. But kind of the chanting is not so much external, is more internal. So sometimes, especially when new devotees, they may be chanting and they say, I don't see anything happening. Does this thing even work?
Mhm.
And so, what kind of advice would you give them to newer devotees who, I mean, even myself, I need to hear it.
Well, like I say, I wish I could just reach back 30 years ago and shake myself or something like that. It's one of those things that you think, well, here I am. This is Krishna consciousness. Its main process. We just celebrated Gaur Purnim, 537th anniversary of the appearance of Lord Chaitanya. What was the Yuga Dharma? Okay, hey, buddy, this is the central key. Why can't I wake up and recognize that I'm never going to be able to get around the process of chanting? I'm going to have to perfect it, not get around it. And what will it take exactly? One thing that I always have noticed, that even if I'm chanting crummy rounds, but I'm struggling to chant, that there is an effect, and one of the things I've done for years and years and years is pray to the deities to somehow help me to figure out what it would take to increase the quality of my chanting, But you can go on year after year, and the chanting is just kind of one of those things you do because you should do it. You've made a vow to chant 16 rounds, so okay. We do that, but sometimes at some odd moment, for some reason that I've never been able to discover, you get a key, you get a clue, and suddenly there's a big change in the way you chant. And I found in general that I chant much better if I can do it early in the morning. I took a hint from Ram Roy about that. That's where I started to get back into that. And I found that makes a difference. I found that it makes a difference to chant down here. I found it makes a difference to chant with Tulsi. Although sometimes I'm not able to do that, for one reason or another, but those things seem to make a difference. Again, if there is a will, first thing sometimes I have to pray for the desire to desire to change my japa to a better. It's kind of, you have to even go one step further removed. That you pray for the desire to have the desire to want to increase your japa. We just think about it. Yeah, I should want to increase my japa. Okay. What's for prasadam? It's kind of like that. We have to pray to have the desire to want to increase the desire. And then when we want to increase the desire, then we pray to have the Supreme Lord reveal what it is that will bump us up a notch. What will it take? What are other people doing? What have other people done or said? What are some of these techniques that people talk about? Do they work or not? If they don't work, fine, just move on and try something else, But if you are making an effort on a daily basis to figure out what it takes to increase your chanting, its quality, that in itself will eventually bring you to the perfection, because the desire is there. Krishna wants you to perfect your japa. You want to perfect your japa. It's going to happen, but may not happen right away, So, and when it does, it's kind of at that point, if you're really chanting well, then a lot of problems are just no longer problems, because all problems start in here. There's that, what we call consciousness, what I call that warm and fuzzy thing between your ears. It's consciousness, And if you can fix that, you've fixed all your problems, basically, because that's where they are. And that is the process for getting out. As we said, that's Lord Chaitanya's process, is through chanting we purify ourselves and we leave the material world. I think some others had questions too. Yeah.
Hari Krishna Prabhu, please accept.
What is your name, Prabhu?
Bhakta Fred.
Bhakta?
Bhakta Fred.
Vren?
Fred.
Fred. Okay, Fred.
Sorry. Please accept my humble obeisances and thanks for the nice class. I was actually wondering, what really are material desires? Is it family life, or sorry, it's kind of a complex question. I'll try and do it as best I can. Is it family life, or is it just the desire to enjoy things? And I find that this question comes up in my personal life when I'm tired. When I'm not tired, I don't have complaints about this process really at all. But when I'm tired, it's like I'm a different individual, and I just think, why attempt brahmachari life if it could be that I'd be more interested in Krishna consciousness and more fixed doing like a grihastha life. So I'm wondering, like, what is the real benefit of pushing yourself to where you want to just do things against varnashram dharma? Against varnashram? So I mean, like, when I'm tired, I'm just like, well, I'd rather just be on my own. You can't really, that's not really a possibility, you know. But if I was in, I'm just wondering if it's better to like, how do we know if we're supposed to be brahmachari or we're supposed to be grihastha, that kind of stuff, that I'm not just doing it whimsically because I think it's better or easier because there's less overall suffering or
well,
work.
Generally we try to explain to everyone that it's better to try to start off with the goal of remaining celibate, whether you're a Mataji or whether you're a man. But if it just isn't working over some time, then the reasonable thing is to, and I always think that this particular section of Bhāgavatam is the perfect situation. You know, that Kardamuni does not decide to, go bar hopping or, go on Tinder or something like that. He's, trying, he's just asking the Supreme Lord that, okay, my dear Supreme Lord, I have this desire, I have this desire, I haven't seemed to be able to shake it. So, if you feel that this is also good for me, then you arrange it. So he puts it in the Supreme Lord's hands, knowing that either the Supreme Lord will deliver or not, depending on what's the best thing for him. Because generally, the way the material world works is usually people get connected with the wrong person. It's just so easy to happen in the material world. Prabhupada talks about this as one of the other themes of this whole section, that Prabhupada mentions that in the previous ages, people used to have the marriages arranged by the parents. Prabhupada talks about that, and how would they do it? They would do it with astrological. Of course, these days, no one knows astrology. Western astrology is just really way off the mark, Bhaktisiddhanta said that, the astrological constellations are figured completely differently than the way they should be figured, at least in Western astrology, and so that doesn't help much. And these days, I don't think anybody would suffer to have their parents arrange a marriage for them. People want to be able to pick their own poison, so it's it's easier to not have anybody, and even Prabhupada himself pulled himself out of the process of arranging for his disciples' marriages, that way. They have no one but themselves to blame, and the problem is, of course, that there's no such thing as an ideal situation in the material world, and marriage is one of those things where it's a mutual compromise on everybody's side, and there's always I think of it as the toy in the Cracker Jacks box. If you didn't grow up in the United States, you don't know what I'm talking about. It used to be there was this, kind of caramel popcorn that they would call Cracker Jacks, and people would sell it usually at sporting events, and usually had like a whistle or a decoder ring or some kind of thing in there. It was the special prize you would get, and it's similar with marriage, that there's some aspect of the other person you're not going to know about until it's too late. and it's not only them, but it's also you. They're going to figure something out about you that they didn't know about. And then you're just going to have to live with it, and it's just the way it is, that there's never going to be a perfect thing. You're going to have to, at some point, say, well, this is how it worked out. And there are reasons why, certainly marriage should be sometimes broken off because of really serious problems. But in general, the idea is that we're really trying to serve Krishna, and it's not going to be, ice cream and peaches or anything like that. It's not going to have only the good side. There's going to be a lot of work. Any relationship's going to have a huge amount of work involved in it. And it's not going to be easy. There are going to be times when it's going to be difficult. And if the whole marriage is based on material happiness, it's not going to fly. It's going to fall apart. If it's based on both partners realizing it's a commitment to serve Krishna and to work through the necessity to go from, as we've been talking about, sakama devotion to akama devotion. And we do that through the process of vivaha yagya, the marriage ceremony. So that's a few things I would say about it. Of course, there's much more that can be said about it, and that's one of the main themes of this part of Srimad Bhāgavatam. You had a question?
Thank you for sharing your realizations about improving chanting. I do Harinams that are either 3 hours or 4 hours, and I went on a couple that were 12 hours, so, or actually 3. And one thing I notice is that if you're looking at your watch wondering when it will end, that if you just try to absorb yourself in the holy name, the time will go by, and
right.
And it'll go by very, very quickly. And so whenever I find, when I'm in that mode of just wishing it was over, I just go back to really absorbing myself in chanting, and then you're really in a transcendental state, and the time doesn't really matter anymore so much. Right. And that's one secret, that the reason the job is difficult is you're listening to your mind instead of listening to the holy name, and if you just go back to listening to the holy name, then it'll be all right.
Yeah, it's those kind of things that sometimes it takes years to really recognize that you're doing that, in your mind, and that, this is the way, this is my, how long will I suffer this attitude, how long will I just do it without thinking about it and not take it to task in some kind of way. Harmony.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Maharaj. Since we're on the topic of improving chanting, I just wanted to offer the the point that probably most people have heard His Grace Mahatma Prabhu's
Right.
affirmations, japa affirmations, and they're just magical. I just love them. I have them. You know, I had to buy the little book to have them all, you know, easily accessible because they're really transformative. If you tell yourself, you know, when I tell myself those affirmations, especially the one that I love to chant. I want to chant. I love to chant. I get to chant. Something like that.
Oh.
And yeah, if I just tell myself those things before I chant, then it really sets the tone for the whole japa session, and it really allows one to like adopt those sentiments that are in the affirmations. That, you know, when I chant, I turn off my world and I turn on Krishna's world.
Right.
So these words are like, you know, really meaningful, and they really set a right structure, mindset for chanting. And another thing that's been helpful for myself, you mentioned His Holiness Srila Sachinandan Maharaj, who I'm a big fan of. And anyways, at one point I was hearing his japa, you know, recommendations too, and that was super helpful for myself. And I had he has a small book you've probably seen, Nam Rahasya. It's a really nice book, small but really powerful, with quotes from Bhaktivinoda and others about chanting and how to go about increasing increasing one's quality and quantity. And so I just wanted to share those thoughts since we were on the topic.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. I'm going to make this really quick, if you don't mind. I was actually inspired to add another comment. You were talking about, thank you for the class, by the way. It was really, really nice, encouraging me to delve deeper in my chanting. I was listening to a class by His Holiness Bhakti Tirtha Swami yesterday, and he talked about how we actually, our desires have to be bigger than what we're at now, like what we can even conceive of. Because the more we create bigger desires, the more Krishna will reciprocate with them, the more sincere we become. And so, kind of tying this in to this idea of that the Holy Name is actually a person. So like we're actually creating a relationship with the Holy Name. And to create a relationship with the Holy Name, we have to be attentive. Like creating a relationship with anyone, we have to be attentive. And so I like this idea that Bhakti Tirtha Swami was saying, that we actually have to have that like desire that's so big, even though we don't think it's possible. Like we can, if we hold on to that sincerely, and you know, we have utsaha, we have patience and enthusiasm, all these things, then it's actually possible. And he was saying that, and that was really inspiring for me yesterday, and that like perfectly tied in with class today. So thank you. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. So we're way over time. So I'll thank you all very much for your kind attention. All glories to Srimad Bhāgavatam. All glories to the Holy Name. All glories to the Vaishnava devotees of the Lord. Hare Krishna.